Hello, hello, and welcome to Coaching Corner with me, Tracy Forsyth. And today I am inspired by that saying, it's the grit in the oyster. And, I love the power of a reframe. And for some reason, that saying, it's the grit in the oyster, has been reverberating around my mind. It may be because my family and I recently went to the seaside and oysters were on the menu. I am not personally a connoisseur, especially as the last time I tried one many years ago, it fought back and I cut my lip on the shell. But that's a different story. Anyway, so the full saying, of course, is it's the grit in the oyster that makes the pearl. That tiny bit of grit or grain of sand or whatever it is that gets inside the shell of an oyster. And to reduce the irritation, the oyster very cleverly slowly secretes layers of aragonite, sounds like something from Lord of the Rings, and conchiolin that make up its shell. So, by the way, I got this from the Natural History Museum website, not from David Attenborough, so I hope it's right. Sir David Attenborough. So anyway, that creates a material called nacre, otherwise known as mother of pearl. And that encases the grit to protect the oyster, and over time, a pearl is formed. So that made me reflect on what irritants or grit I've had in my oyster and what pearls they've turned into. I've actually got a bit of grit in my, excuse me, I'm sorry. Anyway, so what immediately comes to mind when I think about the grit in my oyster that's turned into a pearl is being made redundant. That was a bit gritty. I felt sorry for myself. I felt, unwanted. But without that, I would never have made this pearl of a purpose-driven career now. I would never, I don't think, have found such happiness. Other things, I remember back in the day when I was a budding producer director and I'd gone to work on a new show. I remember being told that one of my films wasn't that special, and I had just had my first chance at directing in a different genre that I was used to. I'd worked so passionately on it and I was so proud of it, but it just wasn't that special, according to the person who was leading that program. So that feedback was a bit of a gritty moment. And, I may have cried a bit, licked my wounds, etc. But, it meant that I learned, I took that feedback and was determined to make my second film blooming amazing. So I think what the saying has reminded me is that whether we want it or not, a bit of grit in our oyster doesn't have to be a bad thing. It can morph into something beautiful. But like the oyster, you have to tend to that grit, whether that's like self-compassion, reflection, development, or just waiting for the time to pass and for the wisdom to reveal itself. So I'm curious to hear from other people, what's been the grit in your oyster, and what is your aragonite or conchiolin? I hope I'm saying that right. What is your secret sauce that you've used to turn it into a pearl? All right, that's it for this week. I will see you next week. Take care.